2 years ago, my own son and his wife told me to pack my things, gave me $30 for gas, and told me never to come back. Now, out of nowhere, he's calling me, saying they'd like to visit my new house. But I know it's not about family. It's about money. And this time, I'm ready. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The phone rang just as the last of the daylight faded over Sarasota Bay. The rain had been steady all afternoon, the kind that makes the water look silver and still. I was sitting in my sunroom, barefoot, reading over the monthly reports from my rental properties. The papers were neat in front of me, my pen resting across the top page. The caller ID lit up. William. 2 years without a word, and suddenly here he was. I let it ring twice, 3 times. Then I picked up. "Hello, William." "Mom," he said, his voice warm, maybe too warm. "It's been a while." "That's one way to put it," I replied. There was a pause, not the kind where someone is gathering their thoughts, but the kind where they're trying to figure out how to start asking for something. "I wanted to see how you've been. Nancy and well, we'd like to have you over. We're doing a barbecue this Saturday." I could hear the faint sound of a TV in the background, and Nancy's voice, muffled, saying something I couldn't make out. "You want me to come to your place?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Yes, we thought it'd be nice to reconnect." Reconnecting. That was a word I hadn't heard from him since before the day they told me I was too much of a burden and handed me $30 like it was a generous act. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "No occasion. Just family." Family. I looked at the rain sliding down the glass, remembered standing in his driveway 2 years ago, my car trunk packed, Nancy watching from the doorway. Saturday, I repeated. "Who else will be there?" "Just us, maybe a couple of neighbors." He sounded like a man trying to keep his tone steady, but I could hear something underneath, tension, maybe even urgency. "All right," I said, "I'll come." His relief was too quick. "Great. That's great, Mom. It'll be good to see you." "Sure," I said, and hung up before he could add anything else. The room was quiet again, except for the rain. I set my papers aside and looked out over the bay. The tide was low, and the seabirds were huddled along the shore. 2 years without so much as a birthday card, and now he wanted me at his house for burgers and potato salad. No, there was something else. I got up and walked into the kitchen. The house was warm and calm. Polished oak floors, white cabinets, the smell of the bread I'd baked that morning still faint in the air. This wasn't the life I had when they sent me away. Back then I had a suitcase, a worn-out car, and a motel key in my pocket. Now, I had more than they could imagine. I poured myself a cup of tea and thought about that phone call. He hadn't asked me a single thing about my life, my health, my days. It was an invitation without curiosity, and I'd learned enough in 68 years to know that when someone who's cut you off suddenly invites you back in, it's rarely out of kindness. I went back to the sunroom and picked up the reports again, but my mind wasn't on the numbers anymore. It was on William and Nancy and the way they'd looked at me that day in Jacksonville, like I was something they needed to sweep out of their lives. If they wanted me to come, I'd go, but I'd go on my terms. 2 years ago, I was living in a small in-law suite at the back of William's house in Jacksonville. After my husband died, it seemed like the practical choice. William and Nancy had a big place with a separate entrance. I paid for my own groceries, kept my things tidy, and did my best not to be in the way. I thought it was working fine, but looking back, maybe Nancy had been building up resentment from the start. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I had come inside to put a load of laundry in their washer because mine in the suite had finally quit. I heard Nancy in the kitchen talking on the phone. She didn't see me at first. "She's always around," she was saying. It's like we can't have our own space. And she's got an opinion on everything. I stepped back, but she spotted me. Her voice tightened. "Oh, hi, Elizabeth." I didn't mean to overhear. I said, "I was just doing some laundry." She crossed her arms. "This is what I'm talking about. You don't respect boundaries." That caught me off guard. "I'm sorry you feel that way." I thought I was being considerate. We stood there, the hum of the refrigerator between us. She didn't smile. "You give William advice about things that aren't your concern. Our bills. How we run the house. It's not your role." "I'm his mother," I said quietly. "If I see him struggling, I can't just say nothing." Her eyes narrowed. "Well, it's causing problems between us. And it has to stop." I could feel my stomach nodding. "Are you saying you want me to move out?" "I think that would be best for everyone." That's when William came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked between us. "What's going on?" Nancy answered before I could speak. "We've decided it's time for your mom to find her own place." I waited for him to disagree. He didn't. He just sighed, like he'd been expecting this conversation. "Mom, we appreciate everything you've done, but Nancy's right. We need space." "Space." I repeated. "William, I just lost your father last year. I'm not asking for handouts. I pay for my own food. I barely use the main house." "It's not about money," he said, though his tone told me it probably was. "We just need our own life." It felt like the air went out of the room. I had lived there for almost a year. I had helped them with repairs, watched their dog when they traveled, even cooked when Nancy didn't feel like it. And now I was being told I was a problem. "I don't know where I'm supposed to go," I said. William glanced at Nancy, then reached into his wallet. He pulled out a 20 and a 10. "This should help you get settled somewhere for a few nights, for gas or whatever you need. $30. It might as well have been 30 cents. I stared at the bills in his hand. "That's it. That's all we can spare right now," Nancy said. Her voice was calm, almost cold. I took the money because at that moment I couldn't think straight. My face felt hot, and my hands were shaking. "How soon do you want me gone?" I asked. "Today would be best," Nancy said. "That way we can all move on." It was early afternoon. I walked back to my suite, closed the door, and sat on the bed. I looked around at my things, clothes in the closet, a few boxes of photo albums, my sewing machine on the table. I didn't have much, but it still felt overwhelming to pack. I loaded what I could into my old Camry. The back seat was stacked with bags, the trunk full of whatever I couldn't leave behind. My sewing machine went in last, wedged between two boxes. When I was ready to leave, I walked back to the house to say goodbye. William was in the living room, pretending to scroll through something on his phone. He didn't look up when I stepped in. "I'll call you when I get settled," I said. "Okay, Mom," he replied without lifting his eyes. Nancy stood in the doorway to the kitchen. "Drive safe," she said, like I was just going on a short trip. I stepped outside. The driveway felt longer than usual. I got into the car, started the engine, and backed out slowly. Neither of them came to the window. I drove with no real plan, just away from that house. The sky was overcast, the kind that makes the afternoon feel like evening. The $30 in my purse felt like an insult more than help. By the time I reached the edge of town, I saw the glowing sign for a budget motel, the kind with outside doors, and weekly rates posted on the wall. I pulled in, went inside the small office, and asked the clerk about a room. "It's $75 a night, but if you pay for the week up front, it's cheaper," he said. I counted out the money from my wallet, using up almost all of what William had given me. He slid a key across the counter. "Room 14. The room smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and stale air. The carpet was worn and the curtains were thin, but it had a bed, a bathroom, and a lock on the door. I set my bags down and sat on the edge of the bed. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. That first night, I heated up a can of soup on the small microwave in the corner. I ate it slowly, wondering how I had gone from having a home, a family, and a place at the table to sitting alone in a motel with $30 as my start-over fund. I told myself I'd figure it out. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to stay in that room forever. The days in that motel passed slowly. I tried to make them feel normal, but nothing about it was. Every morning, I'd heat water in the little coffee maker, stir in a spoonful of instant coffee, and eat a piece of bread with peanut butter. The bedspread was thin, and the noise from the parking lot never really stopped. I kept my spending as low as I could. Soup, bread, peanut butter, and whatever fruit was cheapest at the corner store. I didn't have the appetite for much else. After the first week, I knew I needed to find work. I couldn't just sit in that room counting the dollars I didn't have. I walked around the area asking about part-time jobs. Most places weren't hiring. Finally, a small plant nursery a few miles away had a sign in the window. The owner, a woman in her 70s named Rosa, looked me over and asked if I could lift bags of soil and water plants in the Florida heat. Yes, I said without hesitation. She paid cash at the end of each week. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover groceries and a portion of the motel bill. The work was simple but steady. I'd arrive early, sweep leaves from the gravel paths, water rows of flowers, and unload deliveries. By afternoon, the sun would be hot enough to make my back ache, but I kept going. The physical work was almost a relief. I didn't have much energy left for thinking. Weeks passed like that. Work, motel, repeat. Every now and then I'd drive past William's neighborhood, not to see him, but to remind myself that I was better off without the weight of his disapproval hanging over me. One afternoon, while sitting in the motel lobby flipping through the local paper, I saw a small ad on the back page. Estate auction, waterfront duplex, as is, serious buyers only. It caught my attention. I'd always liked old houses, and the idea of owning something near the water seemed impossible, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called the number in the ad and learned the auction was in 3 days. The property had belonged to an elderly man with no close family. The house was empty, and the estate wanted a quick sale. That night, I sat at the small desk in my motel room and went over my finances. I remembered the small life insurance payout from my husband, money I had promised myself I'd only use if I truly needed it. It wasn't much by most people's standards, but it was more than I'd ever had in one place. The next morning, I drove to see the property. The duplex was old, the paint faded, and the yard overgrown, but it sat right on a narrow stretch of water that led to the bay. I could see past the weeds and peeling paint. The bones of the place were strong. Inside, it smelled musty but not rotten. One side was in slightly better shape than the other, just worn floors, dated wallpaper, and a leaky faucet. The other side had water damage on the ceiling and an outdated kitchen that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1970s. I stood in the empty living room, looking out at the water, and felt something I hadn't felt in months, possibility. The day of the auction, I dressed in the plainest clothes I had. I didn't want anyone to think I was a serious bidder. The crowd was small, a few local investors, a couple of curious neighbors. The bidding started low. I waited, letting the others drive the price up bit by bit. When it slowed, I raised my hand. The number was still far below what I'd feared. One man countered, but I matched him without hesitation. He hesitated, then dropped out. Sold. The auctioneer called. Just like that, it was mine. The price was low enough that I could pay in full with the insurance money, leaving me with a small cushion for repairs. I moved into the better half within a week. The first night, I slept on an air mattress with my few belongings stacked against the wall. The water outside my window was calm, reflecting the streetlights. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. During the day, I kept my job at the nursery, but every spare hour went into cleaning and fixing the other half of the duplex. I scrubbed walls, pulled up stained carpet, and painted until my arms ached. I learned to patch drywall from online videos. Rosa's son, who did handyman work, showed me how to fix the plumbing in exchange for a few home-cooked meals. I bought secondhand appliances from a thrift store that sold items from estate cleanouts. It took 4 months of steady effort, but the day I put a "for rent" sign in the front yard, I felt a kind of pride I hadn't felt in years. Within a week, I had tenants, a retired couple looking for a quiet place by the water. Their rent covered my monthly expenses and left me with enough to start thinking about the future. I opened a small savings account and put every extra dollar into it. I knew I couldn't stop with just one property. Living in that duplex, fixing it with my own hands, and seeing the first rent check clear, it changed something in me. I had gone from $30 in my purse to owning a home with no debt. I told no one, least of all William and Nancy. They didn't need to know I was building a life that had nothing to do with them. I went from a budget motel to owning my first home without owing a cent. If you've ever had to start over from scratch, subscribe. We understand each other here. And if you don't think starting over takes guts, tell me in the comments why. Once the first duplex was rented and the tenants settled, I didn't slow down. I kept working mornings at the nursery and spent afternoons tackling small projects around my own side of the house. I wasn't just making it livable, I was making it better. Every patch of fresh paint, every tightened faucet, every fixed screen door made me feel more in control. Most of what I learned came from watching videos online and asking questions at the hardware store. I learned how to lay tile by practicing in the small bathroom. I replaced cabinet hardware, installed light fixtures, and even figured out how to repair a section of rotted wood on the porch. Rosa's son came by now and then to help with the jobs I couldn't handle alone. We worked out simple trades. I'd cook dinner, bake bread, or help him keep books for his small repair business, and he'd handle anything that needed a professional touch. That way, I didn't have to drain my savings with every repair. When the first year's rental income started to add up, I didn't touch it for personal use. I opened a separate account and let the money sit there. By the end of the year, it was enough for a serious down payment on another property. I started looking at listings for distressed houses, not the ones that were falling apart beyond repair, but the ones that had been neglected or whose owners needed to sell fast. The kind of places most buyers skipped because they didn't want the work. The second property I found was a small single-family home just outside downtown. It had good bones, but had been empty for months. The yard was overgrown, and there was water damage from a leaky roof. The owner had inherited it and lived out of state. He was ready to let it go cheap just to avoid paying more taxes on it. I bought it outright with the rental income and a small portion of my savings. For 6 months, I worked on it every spare moment. The roof got patched, the walls were repainted, and I pulled up old carpet to reveal hardwood floors that just needed sanding and polish. When I put it on the rental market, a young family moved in within days. Their rent covered what I had spent on repairs within the first year. After that, it was all profit. By then, I knew exactly how powerful this could be. Owning property without debt meant I didn't owe the bank a cent. If one tenant moved out, I didn't panic. The others kept things afloat. It became a cycle. Work, save, buy, fix, rent. The third property came from a county auction, a small triplex that had been foreclosed on. It was in rough shape, but nothing I hadn't seen before. The location was the real draw, close to shops, the bus line, and a park. It took me nearly 8 months to bring it back to life. I replaced broken windows, updated the plumbing, and turned the smallest unit into a furnished short-term rental. That one brought in more money than I'd expected, especially during tourist season. By the time the third property was fully rented, I didn't have to think about money in the same way anymore. My basic needs, bills, and even extras were covered before the month began. Every dollar after that went into savings or improvements. 18 months after I left that motel, I went from having $30 in my purse to owning 3 properties outright. No mortgage, no credit card debt, no car payment. My net worth had crossed into the millions. It was never about becoming rich. It was about never being at someone else's mercy again. That thought alone was enough to keep me moving forward. With the steady income, I started looking for a place to live that would truly feel like home. I wanted something I could grow old in, with enough space for my garden and a view of the water. That's when I found the old house on Sarasota Bay. It was a historic property built in the 1920s with a wide front porch and tall windows that faced the water. It had been lovingly maintained by the previous owners, but they were ready to downsize. The price was fair, and I didn't hesitate. I sold my side of the duplex to the retired couple who had been renting the other half. They'd fallen in love with the location and wanted the whole place. That sale gave me enough to buy the Bay House in cash. Moving into that home was a quiet milestone. I furnished it simply, with pieces that were both comfortable and meant to last. The kitchen had white cabinets and a farmhouse sink, perfect for the kind of cooking I loved to do. The back porch became my favorite spot, especially in the evenings when the sun turned the water gold. I still managed the rentals myself. I liked knowing my tenants and keeping an eye on the properties. I did walkthroughs twice a year, made sure everything stayed in good shape, and handled small repairs quickly. Good maintenance kept good tenants. The rentals brought in more than enough to cover not just my expenses, but also unexpected costs. I had savings accounts for each property, an emergency fund, and investments that my banker had helped me set up. I wasn't living extravagantly, but I was living without worry. The woman who had once stood in a budget motel room, counting $30 like it was all she had left, now had financial independence most people never reached. I didn't post about it online. I didn't tell people I didn't trust. My closest friends knew, but otherwise I kept it to myself. That privacy was worth more than showing off. What I didn't know was that my quiet success had reached William and Nancy in a way I hadn't expected. And soon they'd be knocking, not to make amends, but to get something they thought they could still take from me. 3 days after William's invitation, my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen wasn't his, it was Nancy. I let it ring a few times before answering. "Hello, Nancy. Elizabeth. How are you?" Her voice was bright, stretched just enough to sound like she was performing. "I'm fine," I said. "What can I do for you?" "Oh, nothing in particular," she said. "I just thought I'd check in, since we'll be seeing you soon at the barbecue. How's everything in Sarasota?" I could hear faint clinking in the background, like she was washing dishes while talking. That casual tone was deliberate, the kind of small talk people use before they steer the conversation somewhere else. "It's been a challenging year," I said slowly. I could almost feel her ears perk up through the phone. "Oh, what happened?" I kept my voice even. The housing market took a turn. A couple of my rentals needed major repairs at the same time. You know how it goes. Expenses pile up. There was a short pause. "Oh, that's tough," she said, but her tone had shifted ever so slightly. "I've even thought about selling one of the properties to cover the bills." I added, "I'm still deciding." The silence this time was longer. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone. "Well, that's unfortunate. I know William was really looking forward to having you at the barbecue, but maybe this isn't the right time. You've got a lot on your plate." I smiled to myself. Oh, I can still make it. A couple of hours away from paperwork won't hurt me. She hesitated. "Are you sure? I mean, with everything going on." "I'm sure," I said. "I'll be there." Her voice didn't hide the fact that she wasn't thrilled. "All right then. I'll tell William. We'll see you Saturday." "See you then," I replied, ending the call before she could say more. I set the phone down on the table and thought about what had just happened. 2 years without contact, and now they invite me over. But the moment they think I'm not doing well financially, the enthusiasm fades. That was exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. I picked up the phone again, opened the recorder app, and made a note. Nancy call, January 12th, reaction to financial trouble. I'd started keeping little records like this for myself. Not to be petty, but because it was better to have things documented than rely on memory. The next day, I played the conversation back. You could hear the change in her tone, clear as day. She started out warm, curious, and then cooled down the moment I mentioned money problems. It told me everything I needed to know. This barbecue wasn't about family. It was about seeing what they could get from me. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen this pattern before. People who had once pushed you out suddenly remembering your number when they think you've got something they need. But the difference now was I wasn't in the same position I'd been 2 years earlier. Back then, I had $30 and no plan. Now, I had options, resources, and the ability to protect myself. That evening, I sat out on the back porch watching the sun sink over the bay, thinking about how I wanted to handle this. I wasn't going to confront them outright. That never works with people who believe their motives are hidden. The better approach was to let them show their hand, then decide what to do with the information. I thought about calling William directly, but I knew he'd try to smooth things over if he sensed I was suspicious. Nancy, on the other hand, was more likely to let something slip if she felt she was in control of the conversation. The test had worked better than I'd expected. She'd not only tipped her hand, she'd practically confirmed what I already suspected, that their interest in me was tied to what they thought I could provide. It reminded me of something my father used to say. If you want to know a person's priorities, see how they treat you when you have nothing to give them. The next morning, I went about my day as if nothing had happened. I checked in on one of my properties, met a plumber about a minor repair, and had lunch at a small cafe in town. But in the back of my mind, I was already preparing for Saturday. I knew there was a good chance the barbecue would turn into some kind of pitch, maybe a family business idea, maybe a request for a loan. I'd seen enough situations like this to know they'd try to wrap it in the language of togetherness. By Friday, I had decided exactly how I'd handle it. I'd go, I'd listen, and I'd let them do all the talking. If they brought up money, I'd ask questions, nod, and never once say yes or no. I'd give them enough space to reveal their real intentions. That evening, I called an old friend in Jacksonville, someone who had lived there long enough to know a little bit about everyone's business. I asked casually if she'd heard anything about William's boat repair shop or Nancy's online decor store. She didn't hold back. The shop's been having trouble. Word is a couple of customers are upset about delays. And that store Nancy runs, I've seen people complain online that they never got what they ordered. I thanked her and didn't ask for more. I already had enough to know I wasn't imagining things. When I hung up, I glanced at the small stack of notes I'd made over the past few days. Dates, calls, little bits of information. It was all starting to form a picture. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. By the time Saturday rolled around, I knew I didn't want to walk into that barbecue without knowing exactly what I was dealing with. I had a strong suspicion about William and Nancy's situation, but suspicions aren't enough. I wanted facts. There's a woman I've known for years named Colleen Myers. She used to work for the state as an investigator before retiring to our area. These days, she takes on private cases, mostly background checks, fraud claims, and digging up records people don't want found. I'd helped her a few years back with a small property deal, so I knew I could trust her. I called her that morning. "Colleen, I need you to look into something for me." Quietly. Her voice was calm, as always. "Tell me what you want to know." I explained that I wanted a full picture of William and Nancy's finances and business dealings. Nothing illegal on my end, just whatever was public record, or what she could find through her contacts. She didn't ask why. She's the kind of person who understands that sometimes you need information before you decide what to do. "I can give you a preliminary report in a few days," she said. "Full details within a week." "That works. Just make sure they don't catch wind of it." I told her. "They won't," she said, and I believed her. 3 days later, Colleen called me back. "I've got enough for you to understand the basics. You still want me to send the written report when it's ready?" "Yes," I said, "but tell me what you have so far." She started with William. His small boat repair shop had been struggling for months. At first, it was just slow business, but then he started taking deposits from customers and using that money to cover other bills instead of the actual work. That led to delays, missed deadlines, and a growing number of unhappy clients. "He's in debt?" I asked. "Deep," she said, "and not just to suppliers. There are at least 3 customers considering legal action. One's already filed in small claims court. The others are waiting to see if he'll pay them back voluntarily." I didn't say anything right away. She let the silence sit before moving on. Then she told me about Nancy. Her online luxury home decor store had a pretty website and plenty of glossy photos, but many of the items didn't even exist in her inventory. Customers would place orders, make payment, and then either never receive their products or get something completely different and much cheaper than what they'd bought. There are at least 15 official complaints filed through the Better Business Bureau, Colleen said, and more on social media. She's been ignoring most of them, blocking people who post negative reviews. "Has anyone taken her to court yet?" I asked. "Not yet, but it's coming. Some of the customers are banding together, and she's got at least 2 vendors threatening to sue over unpaid invoices." It didn't surprise me, but hearing it confirmed made everything feel sharper. I'd been right to trust my instincts. Colleen went on. "Between the 2 of them, they're in a bad position. If either one gets hit with a lawsuit and loses, they'll have to sell assets to cover it, assuming they even have assets worth that much." I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. "Thank you, Colleen. I'll want that written report as soon as it's ready." "You'll have it in a few days. And Elizabeth?" "Yes. Whatever they're about to ask you for, it's going to be big." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring out at the water. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. I knew now that their sudden interest in reconnecting had nothing to do with mending family ties. They were looking for a way to solve their problems, and I was their solution. That night, I went through my own records. I pulled up news articles about businesses that had been caught doing what Nancy was doing. I read about small claims cases where contractors like William had been forced to repay deposits with interest. It was all there, right in the open, for anyone who bothered to look. 2 days later, the full report from Colleen arrived by courier. She's old-fashioned that way, prefers paper for sensitive information. Inside the envelope was everything: copies of court filings, screenshots of complaints, business registration documents showing unpaid fees, and even photographs of the shop and warehouse where they operated. The picture it painted was clear. William was juggling bills, hoping more work would come in before his reputation caught up with him. Nancy was still trying to pull in new customers, even while ignoring the ones she'd already failed. Both were one bad month away from serious legal trouble. I read through every page twice. Then I put the folder in my office desk, locked the drawer, and took the key out. The next morning, I went about my day as usual, met with a tenant to check on a repair, dropped off a donation at the community center, and had lunch with an old friend. But under the surface, I was already thinking about my next move. The barbecue was still a few days away. That was plenty of time to decide how I wanted to handle it. I could go in and confront them directly, or I could listen, take notes, and use what I'd learned when the timing was right. Part of me wanted to walk away entirely, but another part of me knew that this was an opportunity to show them, without raising my voice, without drama, that I was not someone they could take advantage of anymore. By the time Friday evening came, I had my plan. I wasn't going to volunteer anything about what I knew. I'd let them talk, let them make their pitch, and then decide exactly how to respond. But one thing was certain, whatever they thought they were walking me into, they were the ones walking into mine. By Saturday morning, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't just going to show up at that barbecue and listen to their pitch. I was going to make sure the people they had hurt got their say too. The first step was finding the right legal help. I have a friend named Thomas Ray, who's been an attorney in Sarasota for decades. We'd met years ago at a community fundraiser, and I'd always respected his straightforward way of doing business. I called him mid-morning. "Thomas, I have a situation." I began. "I'm listening," he said. I told him about William's boat repair problems and Nancy's online decor store, and about the folder of documents Colleen had given me. I explained how there were customers and vendors already talking about taking them to court. "What I need," I said, "is someone to bring these people together. If they file as one group, they'll have more power." "That's a class action suit," he said without hesitation. "It's not quick, but if the evidence is there and the damages are significant, it can work. Do you have contact information for any of these people?" "I have names, complaints, and a few phone numbers," I said. Colleen gave me enough to start. "I'll draft a letter," he said. "We'll invite them to a meeting and see who's willing to move forward. If half of what you've told me is true, they'll be eager to join." After I hung up, I pulled the list from the folder and started making calls. Some people were cautious at first, but once I explained I wasn't asking them for money, only giving them a chance to connect with a lawyer who could help, their tone changed. One man, a retired Navy mechanic, told me William had kept his boat for 6 months without finishing the job. A woman in Clearwater said Nancy had charged her over $500 for furniture that never arrived. Every story was another piece of the puzzle. By late afternoon, I had more than a dozen people committed to hearing what Thomas had to say. He agreed to meet them in person the following week. That was one side of the plan, the legal side. But I knew Nancy's business relied heavily on image. People bought from her because her website looked polished, and her social media accounts painted her as a tasteful, successful businesswoman. If that image cracked, the whole operation could crumble fast. I thought about who could handle a story like this, not just a gossip piece, but an actual investigation. I remembered a reporter named Julia Stein, who had once written an in-depth series on local charity scams. She was known for checking her facts and not letting anyone off easy. I found her email on the newspaper's website and sent her a short message. "Julia, I have verifiable records showing a Sarasota-based online business that has taken thousands of dollars from customers without delivering products. I also have direct contact with several victims. If this is something you'd be interested in investigating, I can provide documentation. Elizabeth Jennings." She responded within an hour. "This sounds like it could be worth pursuing. Can we meet tomorrow? Bring everything you have." The next day, I met her at a quiet coffee shop near the paper's office. I handed her a slim folder, just enough to prove the story without overwhelming her. Inside were screenshots of customer complaints, vendor invoices marked overdue, and the business registration showing Nancy as the sole owner. Julia flipped through the pages, her pen moving quickly over her notebook. If this all checks out, this is not just a local story. It's a warning to anyone buying online. She asked if I'd be willing to connect her with the customers I'd spoken to. I told her I would, as long as they agreed. Most of them had already expressed a desire to speak publicly if it meant stopping Nancy from doing this to anyone else. By the end of our meeting, Julia had a plan. She'd verify every detail, get on-the-record statements from multiple victims, and request a response from Nancy before publishing. She estimated she could have the story live by the weekend. I told her I hoped it would be ready by Saturday evening. "Why Saturday?" she asked. "Let's just say the timing will make an impression," I replied. That night, I sat at my desk and lined up the plan in my notebook. On one page, I wrote, "Legal, Thomas meets with customers next week to organize suit." Media, Julia publishes exposé Saturday evening. The key was coordination. If the lawsuit notice and the article hit at the same time, William and Nancy wouldn't have the chance to spin the story or hide from the consequences. I called Thomas again to confirm the timeline. He said he could have preliminary notices ready for service by Saturday afternoon if I could arrange for a process server. I told him I could. Next, I called a man named Paul Grant, a retired sheriff's deputy who now worked as a professional process server. I'd met him through a landlord group when he served papers for an eviction case. He was discreet and efficient, exactly what I needed. "I need someone served with legal documents on Saturday evening," I told him. "At a private residence. I want it done properly, but I don't mind if there are a few witnesses." He chuckled. "Sounds like you want to make a point." "I do," I said. We set the time for 7:15 p.m., right in the middle of dinner. By Thursday, Julia had confirmed almost all of the details I'd given her. She had spoken to several customers, collected photos of the products they'd ordered and never received, and even found 2 former vendors willing to go on record about unpaid bills. "It's worse than I thought," she told me on the phone. "She's been doing this for at least a year. I'll have the piece ready for publication by Saturday night." I spent Friday going over everything one last time. The process server was ready. The article was scheduled to go live at 8 p.m. The barbecue was my stage, but the real performance was for the people they had wronged. I didn't feel nervous. I felt prepared. Some people say revenge isn't worth it. I say accountability is priceless. If you agree, share this right now. And if you think I should have just let it go, tell me why in the comments. I'm curious. I left my house on Sarasota Bay just after 5:30. The sun was still up, but the air had that cooler edge it gets in the evenings this time of year. On the passenger seat beside me was a small, neatly wrapped gift box. Inside, there was nothing but tissue paper. It wasn't meant to be opened. It was meant to be seen. Their neighborhood hadn't changed much since the last time I'd been there. Well-kept lawns, cars polished to a shine, and neighbors who knew each other's business. I parked at the curb and walked up the driveway, box in hand. Nancy opened the door. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were scanning me. "Elizabeth, you made it. Come in." "Thank you," I said, stepping inside. The smell of grilled meat drifted in from the backyard. Through the sliding glass doors, I could see a small group gathered around a picnic table. A few neighbors I recognized, some I didn't. I set the box on the kitchen counter where it would be in plain view. William came in from outside, wearing an apron with his name stitched on it. "Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Glad you're here." "Of course," I replied. We made our way to the backyard, where the table was set with burgers, potato salad, and baked beans. The conversation started light, whether local events, who had just bought which house. I answered politely, but I could feel the way Nancy kept steering things toward more personal topics. By 6:45, the neighbors had finished eating and were lingering over dessert. That's when Nancy leaned forward. You know, family is supposed to look out for each other. When times get hard, you pull together. William nodded. Exactly. We've been thinking maybe there's a way we can all work together. You've done well with real estate, and we've got business experience. If we combine forces. I let him finish. He talked about shared opportunities and family partnerships, but he never once said the words loan or investment. Still, I knew exactly what he meant. At 7 o'clock on the dot, I heard the gate click open. Paul, the process server, walked in wearing a plain shirt and holding a manila envelope. He scanned the group until his eyes landed on Nancy. Nancy Thomas? He asked. She blinked. Yes. He stepped forward. You're being served. This is regarding pending civil action from multiple clients of your online business. Please sign here to acknowledge receipt. The chatter stopped. Every head turned. Nancy's hand shook as she took the papers. This must be a mistake, she said. It's all in the documents. Paul said, his tone professional. You'll want to review them carefully. Have a good evening. Then he turned and left through the gate. Nancy's face went pale. She flipped through the pages quickly, her voice rising. This is ridiculous. These people are lying. Before anyone could respond, William's phone started buzzing. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and frowned. Then it buzzed again, and again. His face tightened as he swiped through messages. What's going on? Nancy demanded. He didn't answer right away. Then he turned his screen toward her. Look at this. The screen was filled with social media notifications, comments, tags, direct messages. Headlines were already being shared. Local business owner accused of taking money, delivering nothing. It was Julia's article, published right on schedule at 8 p.m. sharp. She'd included quotes from customers, photos of orders, and screenshots of messages they'd sent to Nancy asking for refunds. It was thorough, factual, and impossible to ignore. Nancy scrolled frantically, her breathing quickening. They used my name, my pictures. This is going to ruin me. William was still reading, his jaw tightening. They mentioned the boat shop, too, he said, his voice low. Some of my customers are in here. The neighbors were watching, some whispering to each other. A few got up from the table, making excuses to leave. Nancy looked at me. Elizabeth, you have to help us. You know this isn't fair. I picked up my glass of water and took a slow sip. You think it's not fair? William leaned forward. Mom, we're family. We can figure this out if we work together. You have resources. You can help us fight this. I set the glass down. 2 years ago, you handed me $30 and told me to leave your house. No warning, no concern for where I'd go or how I'd manage. And now you want me to fix your problems. Nancy's voice trembled. That was different. Things were tense. No, I said, it was exactly what it was. You taught me the value of $30. Tonight, I'm teaching you the value of accountability. Neither of them spoke. I stood, picked up the empty gift box from the counter inside, and carried it back out to the patio. I set it down in front of them. That's for you. It's as empty as your promises were the day you sent me away. Nancy stared at it, her hands still clutching the legal papers. William looked at the ground. I didn't need to stay any longer. I walked to the gate, feeling every eye on me. As I stepped out into the driveway, I could still hear the faint sound of Nancy's voice, sharper now, accusing William of not telling her about his debts. The night air was cooler than when I'd arrived. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. 2 years after that barbecue, my house is quiet in the best way. No sudden calls. I brew coffee, watch the bay, and thank God I kept records, not grudges. The fallout started fast. Thomas met the customers and vendors. William tried to calm things with a few refunds, but word spread along the docks. By spring, complaints multiplied. His liability policy was canceled for non-payment, and the state reviewed his file. The board suspended his independent license for a year and required supervision after that. Deposits had to be held in a separate account. Estimates had to be in writing. He took a job at a marina upriver. He clocks in, follows a checklist, and answers to a manager half his age. I drove by once on my way to check a roof. He was sanding a hull beside a younger tech. He didn't see me. I kept driving. Nancy's fall was louder. Julia's article was copied, shared, and turned into a TV segment. Customers compared notes and vendors filed. She locked her accounts, then deleted them. Within months, she sold the fancy car and most of the staging pieces from her photos. She settled with buyers through court-approved plans. The rest won judgments and liens. She moved to a small rental across town. People ask if I felt joy watching that. I didn't. I felt safe. There's a difference between revenge and protection. I chose protection. Records, dates, emails, signed receipts. If you're older, like me, hear this. You don't have to yell to be strong. Paper is armor. 6 months later, William called. He asked for time, not money. We met for coffee in a busy place. He said he was wrong. That pride steered him. I listened. I said I heard him. I also said trust is not a light switch. It's a savings account. You earn it in deposits. One apology is a start, not the balance. We agreed on small steps. No loans. No joint projects. Holidays by card. Short calls on birthdays. Sometimes that's as much family as two people can manage after a hard cut. I can live with that. It isn't complete healing, but it is quiet. My life kept moving. I added a cottage near the marina to my rentals, then a duplex farther north. I use licensed trades for electrical and roofs. I get 3 bids for big jobs and check permits. I keep reserves for each address and pay taxes on time. Tenants get written leases and quick repairs. It isn't glamorous. It is predictable, and predictable pays the bills. The house on the bay has a vegetable patch now. I spend 2 mornings a week at the community garden. We grow tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. A section goes to the food pantry. We trade cuttings and recipes. Once a month, I sit with a notebook. I review insurance, taxes, and maintenance plans. I don't chase trends. I replace old supply lines before they burst. I schedule roof checks before hurricane season. When a storm forms in the Gulf, I stock water, bring in planters, and close the shutters. The bay rises, then settles. I hear little about Nancy now. She works part-time at a home goods store. The settlements get paid because a judge set the schedule. That's what a real ending looks like. Bills addressed, not dodged. She stays off social media. People ask whether I would ever let William and Nancy live in my house. The answer is no. This home is not a prize to claim after a rough patch. It is a boundary I earned. I can meet for coffee. I can stand in the same row at church. I can answer when the phone rings. But the front door is my line. On easy evenings, I walk the water's edge and count quiet wins. A tenant who renewed. A repair caught early. The day I bought flowers without checking the bank. These moments won't impress strangers, but they built a life I trust. Do I wish the past were different? Some days, yes. But wishing doesn't fix a roof or mend a heart. Work does. Boundaries do. $30 tried to measure my worth. It only measured what they understood about love. I learned to keep receipts and back myself first. Family can be blood or chosen, and chosen family shows up without a script. If you're in a motel tonight or sitting in a quiet kitchen counting bills, start small. Make one call you've put off. Gather one document. Fix one hinge. Put $5 in an envelope with your name on it. Small steps stack into doors. Doors open into rooms. Rooms become homes. William and I are not who we were. We are civil and careful. We know the cost of pretending. I can bless his effort without funding his choices. That balance is new for me. 2 years later, peace doesn't look like a movie ending. It looks like clean floors, labeled files, and a pantry with beans, rice, and coffee. It feels like holding my own house key and knowing exactly where it belongs. I'll leave you with a question, and I want to hear your stories in the comments. If your own family betrayed you for money, would you ever let them back into your life? Tell me why, or why not. And if this story helped you or gave you something to think about, please like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Your support keeps these conversations going, and I'd be honored to sit with you for the next one. Thank you for being here today.